Good morning. Sorry, I lost my notes. I couldn't see where they were, so I was about to postpone the whole morning. It's like, no donuts, no notes. Let's just go home. I'm really glad to be here. Anyone finding anything as we're reading through the Bible that you're just going, what? Let's just see. Come on. Yeah, have a look around. There is a bunch of stuff that, I've read through the story a few times. And every time I definitely get to spots that I'm like, I don't get that. But what I get to eventually is Jesus. And I'm like, okay, there's hope. Because without Jesus, without redemption, without forgiveness, without grace, man, it's kind of despairing at times. So this morning, you know how like when you watch a movie and at the beginning it comes up and goes, smoking, violence, swearing, sex. Okay, at the beginning of today's message, violence. Some of you might think swearing, but we'll see when I get to that. Sex. Interfamilial sex. Despair. Like the whole gamut we're going to run this morning. And I am going to be honest, there are some things that I'm going to say that may trigger things in you. Because I guarantee you, in a space this big with this many people, we're going to touch themes that feel personal to you. My prayer is that you'll hang tight to the end. That's super important. Because honestly, in any of these stories that we're reading, if we just quit, it could be very painful. And in the scriptures, there are painful stories and painful people. But there is a God who cares, and that's my hope, is that regardless of your story, your backstory, your current experience, your fears, my hope is that you will know a God who sees you, cares about you, and can write a story that we don't even comprehend at the time. So today, this is what this message is entitled: The Used, Abused, Abandoned, but Not Forgotten. And those words may be triggering: used, abused, abandoned. But I want you to take a hold of those last three words I said, but not forgotten. And it's hard because sometimes in the midst of story, we're wondering this: does God even see me? Does he even know I'm here? Does he even care? So 3 stories. Here's 3 names, and I'm going to address each of them. The first is Hagar, the second is Tamar, and the third is Joseph. Used, abused, abandoned, but not forgotten. If you're not at this point reading along, this is not about passing a grade or failing. It's an invitation to just re-engage the Bible. And if you're visiting with us, if you're online and just tuning in, this is just what we're doing this year. We're reading the scriptures beginning to end in a chronological format. So in the order it happened and things that were spoken into the time periods that we're walking through. And these stories are all right in the beginning in the book of Genesis. And Hagar is a handservant, or most simply put, a slave in the house of Abram and Sarai. And God, I'm just going to recap this story a little bit. God makes a promise to Abram that he is going to bless him and he is going to give him an inheritance of people and nations. And Sarai, to this point, is barren. She's not having kids. And so what we come to is a point that Sarai says to Abram, hey, I'm barren. Take my slave girl and have a child by her. And so we see the barrenness issue, like in relationship, it can be male or female, that for whatever reason things aren't working, but we see in this story it's Sarai, because Abram is able to have a child through Hagar. Hagar has this child, and as you imagine, or she gets pregnant, and as you can imagine, there is an incredible tension that comes into play. I think Sarai is certainly reminded that it's her. And so when she sees that her slave girl is now pregnant, she really takes offense. And what you see is that Hagar begins to feel empowered. And she begins to despise Sarai, and Sarai just begins to turn against Hagar and treat her badly to the point that she runs away. But basically, Hagar's story begins with being used. Abram and Sarai come to this point that they're trying to make God's plan come to fruition. But I don't imagine that Hagar was probably sat down with and gone, hey, we've got this idea, we're kind of wrestling with something, we want your input. It's not how slaves were treated in the day. I believe that it was assumed, and they take advantage of a young girl to bring about what they think is God's purposes. They're just trying to help God out. But then the abuse begins. You go into Genesis chapter 16, the story of Hagar, and it says that Sarai begins to mistreat Hagar so badly that Hagar just runs away. She just runs into the desert. And it says she's on the road to Shur, this S-H-U-R, this place. But if you study ancient geography at all, she's headed for Egypt. If you read the story, Hagar is an Egyptian slave. So where's she headed? Home. She runs away. You can't imagine it goes well for runaway slaves, not in our own history. probably not in ancient history, but she hits the road. She's hurting. She's pregnant. She's on her own. And she sits down. And I imagine that the despair. She's used. She's been abused. She's insulted. And here she is, despairing. I don't know if anyone in here has ever come to that point in life. If you have, I want you to listen. Because when Hagar is sitting there in absolute despair, it says, the angel of the Lord. I believe, and a lot of other biblical, and I'm not claiming a biblical scholarship, but many other biblical scholars look at that and say God showed up. Because Hagar says, I have seen the God who sees me. And she names this place, the God who sees me. And God speaks to her and says, Hagar, go back. Because that child that's in your womb, I will also bless. And speaks this to her, gives her a promise. And when we hear the words that were spoken, I think we interpret a little bit differently in our Western mindset. And so I was reading a couple of different commentaries on this promise, because if you, as a mum here, had God show up, and we contextualize it in our American English literal translation of this metaphor, Hagar is told that her son will be called Ishmael, and he will be a wild donkey of a man. Contextually to the way we hear that, how great does that sound? Right? You're going to have this little boy and he's going to be a jackass. I mean, isn't that kind of how... Okay, I've warned you, you might consider something I say swearing. That's as bad as I'll get this time. Right. This is the way we would read that. But a lot of people that read that in a historical context, in a cultural context, in the way that Hagar may have heard it, because to her it's a promise, it's a good thing, and she actually listens and goes back. And so what other people say, the way Hagar may have heard this as a slave, contextually in those days, wild donkeys were what? They're free. They roam. And all Hagar has known is slavehood. But there's a potential in this that God is saying to her, you're going to have a son. And he's going to be a free man. And he's not going to know what you have known. And so you can go back knowing that I've given you promise. And it's interesting later, and I'll come to this just briefly in the story of Joseph, when he is sold to, do you know who? What people group? The Ishmaelites. The children of Ishmael, who are what? They are now nomadic traders. The heritage is not slavery. The heritage that Ishmael moves into is this nomadic, free donkey of a man. Now, some of us read this too and say, well, it says that he will set his face against his kinship. And sometimes I think we as Westerners in our context look at that and say, well, that's just, and I'm not being Racist, I'm trying to be careful. People would look at that in current context and go, well, that's the whole Arab world. That's not what this is talking about. We sometimes take our Western twist on things and project it. God sees Hagar. God goes to Hagar. God speaks promise that seems hopeful to Hagar to the point that she says, okay, I can go back. And she goes back and she has this baby and she names him Ishmael. But God says that's not going to be the child that I'm going to fulfill my promise through. The story doesn't get better. The rivalry continues. And it comes to the point that Sarah is sick of it. I think Abram is sick of hearing about it. And he just says to Sarah, you know what, do as you see fit. Just take care of it. And so they ship her off with a little bit of food and a little bit of water. How long realistically is that going to last, being sent out into the desert? Not long. I know I'm projecting stuff, and this is Tim think, okay? And Tim think, ask my wife, is not always right. But I wonder if it's just kind of trying to wash their hands of it. Just get her out of here. We don't have to see it anymore. We don't have to be reminded of it anymore. Let's just get them out of here. In light of the contempt, Hagar now is basically abandoned to the desert. Used, abused, insulted, abandoned, but not forgotten. Why? Because God still speaks to her. Says, I see you. I know you. And she ends up with the inheritance as promised. I wonder, honestly, if God couldn't have just gone, you know what? That was never part of the plan. She was never part of the purpose. That was something done by man, done in error. I'm done with that too. I've got a promise to get on with. And this is where we get it wrong. We think that God doesn't see, God doesn't care. I must not be in God's plan, therefore He's just done with me. That is not true. You don't know what the end of the story is, and it's not just for you. Yes, it can get ugly. I'm not pretending that it doesn't get painful. When we see pain, when we see people being used, when we see people being abused, when we see abandonment, and it happens in our culture, in our day at horrific levels, and it's easy to go, God, where are you? Why is this happening? How is this happening? Are you done with all of us? I want to take you into a worse story. The story of Tamar. You know, I honestly, let me just say this about Hagar for a moment. I think Hagar would have preferred God to meet with her in the comfort of her tent, rather than in the desert with a boy who is crying, despairing under a bush that she has to walk away from. But sometimes God meets us in those desert places rather than our comfortable spaces, because I think we hear it differently. Sometimes it's not till true desperation do we really hear the heart and the voice of God. Let me move on to Tamar. Tamar is one of the sadder stories in the scriptures. In Genesis 36, if you want to go there, and I'm sort of just going to breeze through the story a little bit. Tamar is a young woman. Judah, one of the sons of Jacob, of Israel, it says, found her, went and got her as a wife for his firstborn son, So Tamar is brought into this family situation. In verse 6, we're told that, but then verse 7, all we know about this boy, this young man, E-R, all it says is this: he was a wicked man in God's sight. So God killed him. We don't know what his wickedness is. We don't know why he turned out the way he did. Could be something to do with Judah's parenting. We don't know. But then Judah, and this is cultural, to continue that lineage, Judah, it says, takes Tamar and gives Tamar to the second son, a brother named Onan. Says to Onan, now you go marry Tamar as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died, for you must produce an heir for your brother. Verse 9, but Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever, how many kids are in here under 18? There's a few. The story is, whenever he had sex, he... Read the story yourself. So here's the reality. This second son is in it for the pleasure, but does not want the responsibility. That's basically what we find here. And so he is, in the same way, well, in a similar way, abusing this wife that he's had to take on. She's just being used. She's used for the pleasure factor, but she's got no inheritance. So what does God do? Kills him too. This is messy, right? And so then what Judah does is he takes this girl Tamar, and instead of taking responsibility as he's brought Tamar into his family, he just ships her off back home. So now you've got this young girl that's been had by these two fellas. Now I wonder if she doesn't have one of those like labels put on her, like Black Widow label. Because Judah goes, I'll tell her that I'm going to give her my third son, but I have no intention really of doing that because I don't want him to die too. So here is what Judah does, is he goes, it's her fault, right? It's her fault that my two boys are dead. No, it's your boy's wickedness. But Tamar is shipped off back home. And I think she realizes, I'm never going to be given that third son. It's not going to happen. And so she concocts a pretty twisted plan too. goes up to the shearing. It's really a celebratory time of year, so colloquially, Judah goes to party. He goes up to this celebration, the shearing season. It's really culturally a bit of a high time. And as Judah's getting up towards town, he notices there's a prostitute there. Well, Tamar has dressed herself up as a prostitute. And she basically seduces Judah. Judah gets her pregnant. Tamar has a plan of how she's going to connect Judah to this. She begins to openly show. The word gets out. Oh, Tamar didn't wait for this other son. She went and prostituted herself. And so Judah goes, bring her out. We're going to kill her now. Man, this is messy, right? Really messy. And then she pulls out his seal and his staff and goes, Judah, this baby's yours. Wow. Used, abused, abandoned. Then it gets really twisted. Bless you. But guess what? If you go to the book of Matthew and the book of Luke and look at the lineage of Jesus, Tamar is in there. Her son Perez is part of this lineage of Jesus. In the midst of this mess, in the midst of the use, the abuse, the abandonment, do you think for a second that Tamar was like, I'm going to hold on because Jesus is coming? Nope. I don't know what the rest of Tamar's life was like. But she was not forgotten. And it wasn't for generations and generations and generations who knew the story of Tamar would they ever see that she was the lineage of Messiah. It's staggering. But this is why I say if we go through these stories, there's used, abused, abandoned, but you are not forgotten. You may not see any inheritance of promise, even for generations. The third one is Joseph. Now, Joseph, when we read about him, and he was the 11th son in a line of boys, he's young, he's immature, he's probably not real bright in the way he relates with his brothers. He's a tattletale, he's outspoken, he's probably a bit cocky, he's probably overindulged and cared for by daddy. He's given this beautiful robe that makes him stand out from all the others, and it says his brothers hate him. But he has these dreams that say, man, one day you're going to be someone. Your brothers are going to bow to you, your parents are going to bow before you. But it looks like it's all over when Joseph goes out to see how the brothers are doing and take some stuff to them from dad. And they see him coming and they're like, here is our opportunity. Messy story. Let's just kill him. Then we don't have to put up with any of this anymore. And so they discuss it amongst themselves. We'll make up a story, tell dad that he was killed. Man, does this feel uncomfortable to anyone? These, like, standing here teaching these stories, I'm like, This isn't fun. I'm trying to guard my mouth because there's lots of things I would like to say that just would make it messier. But he's just going, what on earth? Now it's murder again. But then they see benefit. Hey, let's not kill him, let's sell him. Because then we benefit too and we get rid of him. And so they sell him to these Ishmaelite traders. He ends up going into Egypt to a man named Potiphar, whose wife tries to seduce him. When he refuses to sleep with her, she grabs his cloak and accuses him of rape. He ends up in prison. Talk about used, abused, and abandoned. He's now sitting in prison. What did he do wrong? Nothing so far. In prison, there's other prisoners there, a cupbearer, a baker for Pharaoh. And what happens here is they have dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams. These two are released from prison, and Joseph is immediately forgotten. Do you think that Joseph might have ever in that time gone, God, father of my forefathers, hello? Do you ever feel like you go, hello, God? Are you still aware of me? Have you forgotten me? This shouldn't be happening. This is unjust. This is unfair. This is nothing I ever deserved or earned or wanted. You see, when Joseph does what he says, look, God gives the ability. He continues to honor God, but it just seems to get worse. Because Joseph is the one, he says to the baker and the cupbearer, hey, remember me when you get out of here, okay? Remind them that I'm still in here. And they don't. They just forget about him. And then Pharaoh has dreams, and then they're reminded, oh, there was this guy in prison that told us our dream. Call him. Maybe he can give you the answer. And so Joseph is called out of prison. Story goes on. He tells Pharaoh the meaning of his dreams. They come to fulfillment. Joseph then becomes one of the rulers of Egypt. His brothers come down to find food. And this story continues. I won't go to the end of that story, but what Joseph says in the end to his brothers, it wasn't you who did this. I have 3 brothers. They did lots of stuff. I did lots of stuff to them too. But I don't think any of us would look at each other and go, yeah, you never did that. You never meant to do that. No, we did. I don't think Joseph could really look at his brothers and go, oh, look, it's okay. You didn't mean to throw me in the pit. It's okay. Look, I know you didn't mean to sell me. It just kind of happened. There's something else that Joseph is able to say. There was something bigger happening that I might not have understood in the moment, but I can look back now and go, God was doing this. Was it fun? No. Did it hurt? Yes. Was I used, abused, abandoned? Yes. But was I forgotten? No. God knew where I was the whole time. And it is He who put me here to save you, that His story would continue. And again, it's not for generations do we really see it. When you read Genesis 39, you see over and over and over again, the Lord was with Joseph. Was Joseph always aware of it? I'm not sure that he was. I think there are times he definitely was giving the hello, where are you? But what I see is there is purpose even in pain. I wonder if you're sitting there and you are aware of pain, if you'd be even willing to go, there may be purpose in my pain. Ask the question, God, is there purpose in my pain? Is there something that you're going to do that I can't see right now? Is there a story of hope that's yet to be written out of where I'm at? Hagar, Tamar, Joseph, used, abused, abandoned, but not forgotten. All of these remind us that when we don't see Him, God still remains faithful. And like Tamar, you may not even see it in your lifetime. I was reminded of Ecclesiastes 3:11. It says this, God makes all things beautiful in His time. God makes the story of Tamar, which is one of the saddest stories I find in Scripture. He makes it beautiful 1,000 years later. Generations and generations and generations. We're encouraged this, trust His wisdom, the purpose of God over our longing for fulfillment, and our impatience is driving us and our frustration is crushing us. It's hard to believe that God still sees us. But His word says He will make everything beautiful in His time. Are you experiencing a season now of struggling, of yearning, of hurting, of waiting? Somewhere I have to believe that God is working behind the narrative that we're living in the midst of to do something that's yet unseen, that may yet be beautiful, even when we can't grasp it from beginning to end. I know there's situations where some of us are facing where we're like, where are you? What are you doing? Why are you allowing this? And there's not simple answers. There never are. I don't want to throw some like pacification blanket that just goes, it's going to be okay. It might be painful for a long time. Like a Tamar, you may not see it for generations. But the invitation is to us to lean into God in the now. Whether you feel like you're sitting under a bush in a desert going, I don't see you. Whether you feel like you're in the bottom of a pit or in some prison. Whether you feel like there are accusers around you that would want to burn you rather than restore you. If we had the incredible privilege of having Hagar and Tamar and Joseph stand here, I reckon every one of them would go, hold on. Might not unfold in the way you want it to. Might not unfold in the time frame or on the timeline you want it to. It might not unfold in your lifetime. But the invitation is to hold on. Hold on by faith. And know this, that you're not just measured by your past. You're not just measured by how you've managed it to this point in time. You're not just measured by where you are in this moment. You're not measured by how many times you've asked God, where are you? You're not measured by how many times you've overcome or succeeded or how many times you've fallen short and failed. You're not. His grace is sufficient for all our needs. His mercies are new every morning. His invitation is, come unto me. The way Eugene Peterson writes it in the Message is he says, step out of the traffic. Come to me. Learn my rhythms, the rhythms of grace. I'm not going to tell you your pain's going to be over in this moment. I'm not going to tell you that if you get prayed for right now, it's finished. Sometimes coming and letting someone pray with you is just letting yourself be seen and know that there is a God who sees you. That he has not abandoned you, even in the midst of deep struggle. So as we close this morning, again, I'm going to invite you, if you want someone to just stand with you in the midst of pain, in the midst of need, whatever it is, someone that's just put an arm around you. You don't need to divulge your whole story. You don't have to pour out all your pain. Maybe you just need someone that's going to give you a hug. Let you know that you're in the company of people of faith, of belief. God, my prayer this morning is this. Would you let your kingdom come? Would you let your will be done in our midst, in our lives, in our stories, in our moments, in our pits, in our prisons, in our pain, under accusation, in abandonment. I guess, God, I'm really grateful for the messy stories, for the murky, muddy places that from the safety of an auditorium, we're going, what's up with that? I just thank you that you don't hide all the mess, but you wade into the mess. Lord, have your way in us.